Shalom, shalom, family. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. Welcome back, welcome back. As you can tell by the title today, we'll be getting into some history dealing with the Jewish-Roman wars, particularly within the Northern African territories. We'll be dealing with some of the events and some of the led migrations and where some of these Jews ended up. All right, and just dealing with the history in regards to that, because we hear a lot of our brothers within the community talking about 70 AD and those revolts. However, they don't give you the full breakdown regarding the history. They just tell you that they went straight to West Africa. But we got to break down the full course of it. All right. There was multiple events that led up to migrations into West Africa, but we'll review that today, or a few of them. This will be part one of multiple of these videos. And shalom, shalom, brother. Shalom, shalom to everybody that's tuning in right now and those that'll be tuning in later. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. We're going to get into the information. One second. All right. So here we go. Nope, that's not it. All right. 1 second, family. Play a video right quick, answer this phone call, and then I'll get right back to it. It's real important.
So the big question for the African community, African Americans, and there's been a lot of discussion over it, is, there are plenty of people who think, well, Judaism came with us to the United States or to the Americas from Africa, and this is something that's widely rejected as being impossible. But I think my research indicates that...
All right, family, my bad, and we back. I had to take that phone call, but we are back, and I'm about to go ahead and get back into it. So we're going to start off with this book right here, Black Christian Nationalism. All right, Black Christian Nationalism. And we're going to start at the top and get a brief overview before we get into the history. And it says, the Bible talks about the fact that the Israelites set up their commonwealth in the land of Canaan. The 12 tribes each had designated living areas. Most of them were agriculturalists, and that's very important when you get into the Bantu expansion, because the Bantu expansion was an agriculturalist expansion, basically. But that's just a side note. It says the Levites, who were the priestly caste, had their own land. Their inheritance was different from that of the Israelite tribes or nations. They also incorporated many Canaanite traditions, including religion. They eliminated a lot of the common names and gods, but other gods were assimilated into the society. Starting from Joshua's time, the Levites continued to have relationships with Egypt and the African continent. Although the book of Deuteronomy indicates that Israelites were commanded to never return to Egypt, it is certain that not many centuries elapsed before some of them found their way back to that empire. The traders who transacted sales of horses for Solomon may have been the first to resettle there. In the 10th century, in the time of Solomon's reign before the Christian era, Jewish captives were probably borne off to Africa. All right. So in the 10th century, it's probable that Jewish captives were borne off to Africa, particularly North Africa. We see in the Bible that Israelites forgot God and didn't do the things that were right in his eyes. And thus Israel, under the new cultural commonwealth, did not last 1/10 of the time Egyptian empire lasted. We notice the Jews kept returning to Africa, back to the roots of mankind. They also went to Babylon. In Babylon, there was a tribe called the Elamites, a fact which is recorded in the Bible. The tribe was basically of African origin, and it had African links with ancient Ethiopia. And even that's very important. I don't believe they had ancient links with ancient Ethiopia, but the fact that he was saying that they're African of African origin, meaning they're very black, is because Elam was one of the first sons of Shem. So we can, I guess you can say, postulate that the remaining sons of Shem would be dark or black looking as well, or African looking as well. He says the Israelites were never far away from their roots, the roots that lie in Africa. All right, so where should we start? We're going to start at the beginning sentence on this on this page. It says the legends by European historians concerning the African exploits of Joshua, of David's general Joab, and of the colonists said to have been founded by Solomon's may be disregarded. It can be stated, however, the Jews accompanied the Phoenicians on their commercial expeditions and formed a part of the population of Carthage, the great metropolis founded in North Africa in the 9th century BCE. A seal bearing the name Joab was found in the ruins of Carthage and Phoenicia. Inscriptions records such typical Hebrew name as Joaz and Johazah, or Johahaz or Johahaz. Shalom. Sorry, family. It says it must be remembered that the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, symbolizing the confrontation between the Judaism and Hellenism, took place in Alexandria. The major battle took place in Jerusalem near the Temple of Solomon, where the Hasmonean priestly caste of the ancient Jews defeated the Syrian Hellenists and rededicated the Temple of Solomon to the worship of Jehovah. All right. The largest Jewish immigration to Africa occurred during the Greek period. Jews came in large numbers to Alexandria, which was founded in the 4th century BCE, attracted by a full grant of rights of citizenship. Ptolemy I is said to have disturbed or distributed some 30,000 Jews over his kingdom in military colonies. These Jews rapidly adopted the Greek language and Greek ways, and their numbers were increased by a new immigrations from Palestine. During the disruptions or during the disturbances in Palestine in the 2nd century BCE, the high priest Onassis fled into Egypt and set up a temple at Lentopolis, which lasted until the 1st century BCE. So we see during the time of Ptolemy I, the Jews within these territories, within these colonies, they were designated to adopt the Greek language and culture and ways. All right. And we can see that reflected in 2nd Maccabees chapter 6 with the abolition of Judaism. And we're going to read through this from verse 1 to verse 11 real quick, just to get some context from the scripture as well. It says, not long after the king sent an Athenian senator to force the Jews to abandon the laws of their ancestors and live no longer by the laws of God, also to profane a temple in Jerusalem and to dedicate it to Olympian Zeus, and the one on Mount Gerizim to Zeus, the host to strangers, as the local inhabitants were wont to be. This was a harsh and utterly intolerable evil. The Gentiles filled the temple with debauchery and revelry or revel. They amused themselves with prostitutes and had intercourse with women even in the sacred courts. They also brought forbidden things into the temple, so that the altar may be covered with abominable offerings prohibited by the law. No one could keep the Sabbath or the Sabbath or celebrate the traditional feasts, nor even admit to being a Jew. All right, so we see the same thing going on what we just read from the last page, doing what Ptolemy was doing. But let's keep reading. Moreover, at the monthly celebration of the king's birthday, the Jews, from bitter necessity, had to partake of the sacrifices, and when the festivals of Dionysus was celebrated, they were compelled to march in his procession, wearing wreaths of ivory. Falling upon a vote of citizens of Ptolemy, a decree was issued under the neighboring Greek cities to adopt the same measures, obligating the Jews to partake of the sacrifices and putting to death those who would not consent to adopt the customs of Greeks. All right. It was obvious, therefore, that the disaster had come upon them. Thus, 2 women who were arrested for having circumcised their children were publicly parade about the city with their babies hanging at their breasts and then thrown down from the top of the city wall. Others had assembled in nearby caves to observe the Sabbath day in secret, were betrayed to Philip and all burned to death. In their respect for their holiness of the day, they refrained from defending themselves. So that's just a scripture reference for what we just read right here in this second paragraph, with Ptolemy issuing the Jews to basically convert to Greco-Roman religion. That's really what I should have named this video. Basically Greco-Roman Jewish wars instead of just Roman. But we're gonna continue to read right here where it says, what were these disturbances in Palestine? They were caused by the expansions and conquering of Alexander the Great. The expansion caused confusion in the Eastern world between the traditions of Moses and Judaism and that which came with Alexander the Great, Hellenism. At first, the Ptolemies of Egypt ruled and gave the Jews freedom of worship and political autonomy, demanding only payment of tribute. However, the rabbis and scribes of the Judaic tradition wanted to strengthen Jewish life under Greek rule. All right, so let me take a sip of water, then I'm gonna speak on that statement, because a lot of our brothers and stuff like to say we didn't have rabbis and things like that. That's white man traditions. We didn't have Talmuds or things like that, but we can see during this Greco-Roman period of the Ptolemy, we had rabbis and scribes, and what were they doing? They wanted to strengthen the Jewish life under the Greek rule. It goes on to say, at the same time, Hellenistic tradition was growing in Alexandria, Egypt, and in different parts of the East, particularly in North Africa, where the Bible, the Old Hebrew Testament, had been translated. All right. The translation was called the Septuagint translation because 70 men in 70 days translated it independently of one another. The translations facilitated the understanding and acceptance of the Bible by other peoples in this part of the world. The part of Egypt which gave light unto the world 3,000 years previously again created a new synthesis between Hellenism and Judaism. Some few hundred years after was the birth of Christianity. We must remember that these were African Jews, all right? The African Jews and the empire of the Ptolemies produced the first translations of the Bible, all right? The African Jews in the empire of Ptolemy produced the first translations of the Bible. A long list of religious and physiological writings culminating in those of Philo-Judea launched the first great movement to win the non-Jewish element of North Africa to Judaism, all right? And we can see, and we're going to start to see that a lot of the Berber tribes started to be converted to Judaism throughout this influence and throughout this movement as well. But it says Africa also produced the first Jewish historian known by the name is Jason of Cyrene. We also have Lucius of Cyrene, and we also have Simeon of Niger. All right, and it goes on to say who wrote an account of the Maccabees. So before the destruction of the Second Temple, before the destruction of the Second Temple, there were Jewish settlements in Tunisia and Morocco. All right, that's all the way in Northwest Africa, basically Western Africa, Northern Western Africa. All right, right above Senegambia, Mali, things like that, Mauretania. It says the destruction took place at 70 CE or AD. By the first century CE, there were several thousand Jews in Alexandria and many thousand in Cyrene. All right. It goes on to say when Egypt was annexed to the Roman Empire in 30 BCE, Alexandria lost most of its importance and its commercial center, and the Greek population grew hostile towards the Jews. This is also possible explanation for the fact that Judaism never took hold in the Roman Empire. The reform of Judaism came out of the mixture of Greek Judaism and Egyptian tradition, especially the system later called Gnosticism, which gave fusion and force to both Hellenism and Judaism. This gave rise to what was later called Coptic Christianity. The Jewish population of the time gradually diminished, many migrating to Europe, especially to Rome. So they say, but we're going to dig into the Western African origin or the Western African migration. And we're going to continue. It says, many of us feel that this was the beginning of the European Jew, as it says. Riots occurred in Alexandria in 38 CE when Caligula attempted to force the Jews to worship him as a deity, and the situation did not improve until after his death. Following destruction of the Second Temple in the year 7 or 70, the last embers of the Jewish revolt were ruthlessly extinguished. It says the tradition held by the Jews of Tripoli that their ancestors were brought to the country by General of Titus. This is probably a reminiscence of the dispersion of the Jewish captives over Africa after the destruction of the temple. All right. So they weren't immediately shipped, or they didn't immediately migrate to Western Africa, because in 70 AD, some migrated into Africa and others were sold as slaves. All right, by Titus. And some was even sold on slaves and on ships into Egypt, which we're going to read. All right. So we see that this is the oral traditions of the Jews of Tripoli, that their ancestors were brought in by Titus during 70 AD, and this is in northern Africa. It says the revolt of the Jews of Cyrenica in what is now Libya from 1115 or 115 to 115 to 117 AD was crushed by the Roman general Turbo, who deliberately turned a great part of the territory into a desert. All right. The Jews of that region moved farther west among the Berbers, and we know a lot of the Berbers are in northwestern Africa and West Africa, Senegambia, things like that, Niger. It says where they maintained the autonomy and established trading routes as far south as the Sudan. All right, as far south as the Sudan. So we're gonna continue on to this book right here, this source right here, the Jews of North Africa. And notice again, we know that ancient Sudan was called or basically identified with Western Africa. So they're starting to say that these Jews moved west across the desert and started to establish themselves amongst the Berbers. And some went as far south and started founding and establishing trading routes in the Sudan or within Western Africa. So we're going to read and start from the top, where it says, Shalom, shalom, brother in the chat. Shalom, shalom. So it says, according to St. Jerome, under the Pax Romania, the Jewish communities underwent a period of great prosperity all the way from India to the western tip of Africa. All right. So St. Jerome recorded that it was Jews from India all the way to the western tip of Africa. We know the western tip of Africa is West Africa, even West North Africa. We just read that you had Jews going west to settle amongst the Berbers and even south in the Sudan. So it says their numbers were bolstered as well by the 30,000 Jews that Titus had deported from Israel to North Africa after the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. By this time, there were scattered all over Africa a large number of Jewish communities who had taken refuge there, or who, according to Josephus, had been enslaved and subsequently redeemed by their co-religionists. All right, so you had Hebrew Israelites or Jews being enslaved, and you had other Jews coming to redeem them out of slavery. Like, let me get my brother from slavery. All right. So it says the Jews built synagogues and elected leaders who strove to endow the community with a strong and efficient foundation. This chain of events occurred once again following bar coachable or bar cultures, bar bar culture. I'm just say bar culture insurrection from 132 to 135 AD. The failure of this revolt led directly to the expulsion of the Jews of Israel, who had also been enslaved and redeemed by their North African brethren. All right, so you had Jews within Israel being redeemed by their North African brethren, showing you that even when we were scattered within Northern Africa, we still kept in contact with our brethren within Northern Africa. I mean, within Israel. That's why even if you go into Western Africa and look at the Igbos or traditions, they believe or they say that during the time of Solomon, you had some of them leaving Western Africa and going back and helping him found the temple and then coming back. So they're showing you that although we were scattered sometimes or in the ancient past, we did still keep in contact. But it says the Romans were sometimes tolerant towards their Jewish and Berber subjects and sometimes quite cruel. The massacre of a million Jews in Judea by Titus in 70 AD during the following the siege of Jerusalem triggered many rebellions in the ultra-religious Jewish community of Cyrenica, which according to Josephus numbered over 500,000 people. These rebellions were repressed so harshly that the Jews were almost completely exterminated. Within embittered and overwhelmed by the inhumanity of such a rule, the Jews drifted away from Rome and moved closer to the Berbers. All right, so we starting to see an integration of these Jews swifting away from Roman territories into the desert amongst the Berbers. All right, we're going to see that they continue further west because of later Arab migrations. It says the Jews were then so numerous that in certain cities, such as Bizerti in Tunisia, the Jewish population was the majority. In fact, by the time of the Arab conquest in 698 AD, Bizert was even administered by a Jew. There were also Jewish communities of considerable sizes in many other cities, such as these. I do not want to butcher all of these names, but these will be basically in Tunisia, northwestern Africa. All right. If you wish to just look up a map of these cities where these Jewish communities were. It said it is possible or it is impossible to get an exact figure of the Jewish population in North Africa at that time. But information drawn from a number of reputable historical sources give us an approximate idea of it. We know, as previously mentioned, that Titus deported 30,000 Jews from Israel to North Africa after the capture of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. Similar, following the revolt of Bar Kokhba, a great number of Jews from Israel took refuge in North Africa. Right, so we see that it was coming for Jews to take refuge in North Africa, which would lead to later migrations further. All right. So it says, in addition, Josephus states that there was over 500,000 Jews in Cyrenica. Many historians believe that the 80 million inhabitants of the Roman Empire, over 7 million were Jews, without counting the Judaized or the proselytes. It says we can conclude that the community, in fact, numerically very, very significant. In spite of this, during the first centuries of the Christian era, the Jews felt that their faith was threatened in North Africa as a consequence of the rise of Christianity, and that they had to propagate their own beliefs. Despite the animosity of the African Christians, who were much more powerful than them, thus the Jews focused on strengthening and organizing their communities, allowed them to reinforce their religious convictions and to protect from an often hostile environment. It says we know little about the profession, the professions practiced by the Jews at the time, except that most common activities were certainly agriculture and maritime trade. All right, so again, we were agriculturalists. We know the Bantus were agriculturalists. We know the West Africans are agriculturalists. So, and I believe those would be the earlier migrants from the Northern Kingdom coming into Africa, the Bantus and those other West African tribes. And we're gonna see through the end. Once we get to the end, I guess you're gonna see an idea on who I believe the Southern Kingdom would be, or possibly some of them. I know we do have the Southern Kingdom as well within the Sub-Saharan African Jews as well, though. But it says what is generally agreed is that surviving Jewish prisoners of the wars of Vespasian and Titus were sold as slaves to work on the estates of Roman autocrats which covered wide stretches of North Africa. After their release, they settled as tenants on the state domains, joining the existing class of Jewish farmers. Others may have taken up grain trade. We have a good deal about Jews engaged in shipping those days. Maritime trade flourished in Rome, not less than Phoenicia, Carthage, and Jews seem to have had a part in it. We know indeed that Jewish vernacular transported corn from Carthage to Rome, and that from the 5th to 3rd century BCE, the Jews were very active in the market of Carthage gold in Morocco, where in the region of Ephraim, they created an important community before the destruction of the Second Temple. And it's even important because if you're looking into the Moroccan community or the people who who used to be in Morocco, there's a people known as the Bafour, all right, and they are known to be Jews as well, and they have connections to the Mandi peoples and your Saniki peoples. So this is a possible connection right here with the Bafour as well. And it's also known that the Bafour were some of the earliest people within these territories. So that will even make sense that they were there, or they were settled there before the destruction of the Second Temple, as just said, especially with them being in Ephraim. So it says we can also presume that there existed a rich class of Jews, since Josephus recounts to us that the Roman commanders, Catalius, on the verge of bankruptcy, captured 3,000 Jews who had revolted in the wake of destruction of the temple, executed them, and confiscated their goods. And that's the same thing they was doing during the Spanish Inquisition, killing the Jews and confiscating their goods. Same exact thing. But it says, as mentioned before, the natives of North Africa were the Bedouins, the Berbers, and the Jews. All right, so you had Jews that were natives to North Africa. The Bedouins played a very important role in the propagation of Islam in North Africa. As Fernand Braudel explains, the Bedouins thus carried out the first Islamic conquest. All right, we have to imagine the route of these close, confined groups as these people in miniature with their convoys, the deep desire of the shepherds to remain shepherds, this contempt with regards to the suffocating life of sedentary, everywhere they settled, and with them their language and their virtues, first among the latter, their passion for hospitality. All right, so we see that the Bedouins were one of the first ones to carry out the Islamic conquest, and again, we see that the Jews were native to North Africa. But again, continuing, because this starts to get important, we're dealing with how these Jews would start migrating from these Roman territories into the Sudan, into the Sahara Desert. Because again, as we've already read, they went south, or some went into the Sudan, and some started to swift away amongst the Berbers to get away from the Romans. So it says nowadays, there is an image synonymous with North Africa. It is the camel, often known as the ship of the desert. All right. Shout out to Eldad the Danite. In any case of the desert, stalwart did not always enjoy such popularity, despite the fact that in North Africa, agriculturalists have found archaeologists have found camel bones dating back to prehistory. It seems, however, that it took quite some time for humans to realize the extraordinary potential of this animal and its adaptation for the desert. The camel reappeared in Egypt during the 7th century BCE, but did not become a mainstay in North African society until around the 5th or 6th century AD or CE. It is a very sober and robust animal, though rather slow for modern times. However, a camel can function efficiently for over 2 weeks, even without drinking, sometimes while carrying up to 300 kg on its back, or kilograms on its back. Even with such heavy loads, it can transverse between 40 and 100 kilometers per day. Without the camel, North African nomadism simply could not have spread among the Berbers and the Jews. Furthermore, the Trans-Sahara trade route would have not have been as expansive as the Mediterranean, as they were in the Mediterranean Africa, would almost surely not have prospered as much as it did during the Middle Ages. All right. So we see that these Berbers and these Jews are the ones that started bringing these camels down from North Africa to transverse the Sahara Desert, especially when you're dealing with these trans-Saharan trade routes, because the Jews were the ones who basically were the founders of most of them, or majority. Everywhere you went, there was Jews there. And it's also stated that the Jews were on all the trade routes way before the before the Arabs got there or the Muslims got there. It goes on to say, according to Ibn Khaldun, from the year 1353 on, Takeda in the Sahara South saw over 12,000 heavily laden camels pass through every year. All right, so they said they saw about 12,000 camels passing through every year. And those camels would include people with them. As Welsh explains, no animal ever played so decisive role in history. The camel created a content for more than 1,000 years. It was the camel which made possible any contact within inner Africa beyond the Sahara. So this is how these North African Jews transversed the desert and got into the Sahara and Western Africa. So let's go to this source right here real quick, Between East and West, the history of the Jews of North Africa. All right, let's see where we should start from. One second. Let's just start from the paragraph where it says the uprisings. All right. So it says the relentless conflict between the Jews of Palestine and its Roman invaders, which lasted more than a century, had profound repercussions in the two great African provinces, enriching their Jewish communities with the thousands who were forced to leave Palestine or who immigrated voluntarily. All right. So, family, is what we have to understand. Our ancestors were leaving Palestine voluntarily as well, and they were being forced out as captives by way of enslavement. All right. So we see that they were leaving Palestine, going into North Africa. Like it was a common thing for them, basically, is what I'm trying to say. It says it has been estimated that 30,000 Jews were deported to Carthage by Titus. As Josephus recorded, the presence of 500,000 Jews in Cyrenica in the 5th century of the Christian era. North Africa was at the time the center of extensive conversion to Judaism, as I mentioned earlier. The Palestinians who found refuge in North Africa brought with them a smoldering hate of the Roman oppressors, which erupted into a revolt at every opportunity. And it may be assumed that many voyages through North Africa of leading Jewish personalities, especially those of Akbia or Akbar, archfoe of Roman paganism, were not unconnected with these events. All right. It says, according to Josephus, a group of zealots under the leadership of a certain Jonathan formed a powerful insurrection against the Romans in Cyrenica shortly after the fall of Jerusalem. All right. So again, the zealots, if you know about the zealots, you know what they was about, right? So they formed an insurrection or uprising against the Romans in Cyrenica shortly after the fall of Jerusalem. And Cyrenica is Libya, all right, modern day Libya. It says these indigenous African Jews frustrated this revolt. Following the denunciation of the insurgents by the most distinguished Jew of the city, Josephus or Jonathan, was seized and executed along with most of his adherents. All right, so Jonathan and his adherents were seized and executed. Josephus strongly censored Jonathan and described him as a visionary, an opinion which should be bore in the mind when considering the atmosphere of the first uprising. The spirit of the revolt continued to smother and erupt again more fiercely, this time nearly half a century later. All right, so we see continuous revolts. It says the Jews, excuse me, family. It said it's the Jews, animated by a national and religious ardor that was almost apocalyptic in its favor, rose against the Greeks of Cyrenica and for 3 years withstanding all attempts at repression. It says such acts cannot be assured to have been prompted only by the religious fever of Cyrenica community, even though its members were most frantic of all. The Jews must have been very numerous, militarily well organized, and in all probability supported by the Berbers. Again, we already read earlier that they migrated and settled amongst the Berbers, and some even went to the Sahara with the Berbers. So of course they would have the Berber support, but it also said the Jews must have been very numerous, as well as military well organized. So remember those statements because it's going to come up later. It says, in any event, since Cyrenica was one of the last corners of the Roman world where there was to be fighting a Jewish army, all right? It was the sword of the Jews that put an end to the Greek Cyrenica at the beginning of the 2nd century CE. Again, so the Jews, with their sword, with their might, with their power, put an end to the Greek Cyrenica rule in the beginning of the 2nd century CE. The initial military success of the Jews indicate an effective organization and penetration of the Jews among the Berber masses. But the revolt, like the last insurrection of the Jews in Palestine against the Roman world, was foredoomed. Trajan, reoccupied by the war in the east against the Pathans or the Parthians, appointed Marcius Tarbo to quell the uprising in North Africa, and there do not seem to have been a military repercussion in Tunisia or in Cicerene province. The brutal repercussions of 118 CE marked the end of the development of Judaism in Cyrenica. The survivors fled westward into the Cicerene province, and we know Cicerene was in Tunisia, basically. And it says crossing this and others crossing the Sahara from oasis to oasis, eventually perhaps reaching as far as the Niger River. Let me read that again. The brutal repercussion of 118 CE or 118 AD marked the end of the development of Judaism in Cyrenica. The survivors fled westward into the Cicerene province and southward, crossing the Sahara from oasis to oasis, eventually perhaps reaching as far as the Niger River. So we see it was a continuation of events that led to a migration of Jews into the Niger River area in 118 AD or CE. Other historians mark it between 113 to 115 AD or CE. All right. So we see they did not just flee all the way to West Africa in 70 AD. Like the temples destroyed in 70 AD. They didn't end up in West Africa in 71 AD. All right. We see it took place in 118 AD. It says the 12 boatloads of Jewish captives that Titus had deported from Palestine to North Africa about the year 71 CE reinforced the existing Jewish colonies. According to St. Jerome, Jewish communities formed an unbroken chain from India to the limits of Africa. And again, the other source said Western Africa, the tips of Western Africa. And scholarly research has made it possible to fix the precise sites of those in North Africa. So again, remember, they reached the Niger River. And that's Jews from the Roman revolts. So now we're about to go to this book right here, Paulus Orosis, the 7 books of history against the pagans. And we're going to start from the highlighted sections. Let's see. It says, then all at once, the Jews in different parts of the world, as if enraged with madness, burst forth in an incredible revolt. For throughout all of Libya or Cyrenica, which we just read, they carried out most violent wars against the inhabitants. And Libya was then so forsaken by the killing of the cultivators of the soil that unless Hadrian afterwards had not gathered colonists from without and brought them there, the land would have remained completely destitute and without any habitation or without any inhabitants. Indeed, they threw into confusion all Egypt, Cyrene, and the bed with bloody seditions. But in Alexandria, in a pitched battle, they were conquered and crushed. In Mesopotamia also, when they rebelled, and by other of the emperor, war was introduced up against them, and thus many thousands of them were destroyed in a vast slaughter. All right, so that was just to get some background information regarding the revolts of Cyreine or Libya within 118, 115 AD, basically. Again, we see that they carried out violent wars, or our ancestors, the Jews, carried out violent wars against the inhabitants, against the Romans. They slaughtered a lot. And from the last source we just read, they ended up fleeing into more Roman provinces to the west in Cyreine and reaching south far down to the Niger River. But again, continuing on. A History of the Jews, Solomon Gracie. I'm going to start at the very top. It says Jews are known to have lived in Cyrenica or Tripoli soon after the region or the reign of Ptolemy I in the 3rd century BCE. The numbers were augmented by fugitives from Antiochus Epiphanes of Syria before he was defeated by the Maccabean armies. One of these refugees was Jason of Cyrene, who wrote a book describing the Maccabean War. Josephus, the Jewish historian who lived 2 centuries later, describes Cyrenica as the center of a large Jewish population. A further increase in the Jewish numbers came as a result of the defeat of the Jews by Rome in 70 CE. So large was the Jewish population of Cyrenica in the next generation that in the ill-fated uprisings of 115 to 117, the Jews almost overcame their pagan neighbors and the Roman armies. All right. And again, this is dealing with that migration to the Niger River, those uprisings. It says Rome's fearful vengeance caused many to flee farther west into the territories known as Mauretania Mauretania, and now as Tunisia, all right, which was Cyreine, and Algeria, and also Morocco. It says other Jews from the former population of Cyrenica fled completely beyond the reach of Rome. So where would you go to flee beyond the reach of Rome? Beyond the Sahara Desert. Again, it says other Jews from the former population of Cyrenica fled completely beyond the reach of Rome into the desert to the south. Such is the explanation how the Sahara Desert first acquired Jewish tribes toughened by a fighting tradition and possessed a physical characteristics which is said still make them approximately very closely the original Jewish population of Palestine. All right. So you can find the original Jewish population of Palestine within sub-Saharan Africa. All right. It says they have the fighting traditions and they also have the physical characteristics. All right. What are physical characteristics? What you look like. All right. We know the Jews in the Sahara are black. All right. Which will make them very close to the original Jewish population. Amen. This right here is a description of Jewish Berbers within Morocco. All right. It says the shaven head and crown, lock and Moroccan mark the Jewish Berber. These are possibly Jews that settled amongst the Berbers, as we've already read, all right? Or as we've already read, the Jews were settling amongst the Berbers from these Roman wars and from these Roman exiles. And as we can see, they are people of color, all right? They are people of color. Big, wide noses. Big, broad, wide noses, black skin. All right. So let's continue. In the introduction to the history of West Africa, Let's dig into those people that reached West Africa, Niger River area. Let's dig into that. According to Della Fosse, the first permanent settlements of people from North Africa and Negro land occurred after the Jewish risings against Roman rule in Cyrenica in the 1st and 2nd centuries A.D. So that's when the first establishments of Negro land occurred, according to him. All right, after these uprisings. Who was coming from these uprisings? Let's see. It says, which led to an exodus to the south and to the west. Some of these Jews, or more probably, perhaps, Judaized Berbers, I say that they were Jews as well as Judaized Berbers coming to this location. But it says some of these Jews or Judaized Berbers who were pastoralists crossed the Sahara and settled amongst the Cyreniki, the agriculturalists of the Niger Bend between the site of Timbuktu and Messina. All right. So if you're privy to my channel, if you up to date on my video, we know who the Cyreniki people are. All right. For you all who don't, we're going to review a source in the next slide, but we know who the Cyreniki people are. It says they were eventually expelled from this area, all right, and moved further west to Akkar. And even if you watch my Eldad the Danite video, you would know that a lot of these locations is where he was saying this Jewish territory or this Jewish kingdom stretched from Akkar and Timbuktu and Niger. All right. It says where they were joined by another and probably more numerous body who had come by a more westerly route through southern Morocco. So when they got to Akkar, they met other Jews from southern Morocco. Why is that important? And why were Jews coming from southern Morocco? Because if you look at the history around this time, under the king or the Arab king Abdulrahman, he expelled all the Jews from Morocco, telling them to immigrate or die by the sword or convert. All right. It was convert or immigrate or die. Convert, immigrate, or die. And that can also be where you get some of your Imo, your Kwam, your Yoruba from within Nigeria. That's also another possible link. But again, it says here it suggests the newcomers eventually established the kingdom of Ghana, whose subjects peoples were principally the Cyrenikis. All right. So we're going to see that the Cyrenikis were already Jews. So you have basically earlier Jews or earlier Israelites, the Cyrenikis, and you have the Jews coming from the Roman territories in North Africa settling amongst these early Israelites. And to prove that, we're going to go to the Black Jews of Africa, and we're going to read from the highlighting. It says biblical references are found in various West African traditions as the formation of blacksmith class or caste of the famous legend of Ouagadougou or Ghana, recorded by Charles Montel, relating the foundation of the ancient kingdom of Ghana. The tradition tells of the founder of this kingdom was the chief of blacksmiths, Dinga, descended from King Solomon. According to the tradition, when Dinga became blind and was transferred his powers, he was tricked by his youngest son in the same way that Isaac tricked Jacob to deprive Esau of his right as the eldest son. There are different narrations of who Dinga was, but invariably they established the fact that he was a stranger from afar, probably of white origin. All right, and we gonna peep the hijack. These people actually were known to be Jews, and they actually called themselves Bani Israel. So, and even we're gonna show what the ancient Jews look like within the Roman era, anyway. So, but don't worry about the hijack right there. It says the lengthy components of the story of the exile of the 10 tribes are found in this myth. African scholars consider the legends of Ouagadougou as a condensation of stories which serve as archives for the entire ethnic group. First, there's the long journey of, first there's the long Soniki journey from Yemen or Palestine, then crossing of North Africa through Egypt and what is presently the deep or the desert of Adar and Tignet, and the settlements in the further north region of Timbuktu. It must be said that in the specific case of the Smiths, biblical traditions, and possible Jewish influences seem to be interrelated to the point that in some regions of Mauretania, for instance, Smith are called Yahud or Yabiro. And those people are even related to the Saniki, but you have to watch my other video to know that. And again, dealing with this statement with their trying to hijack and say they're probably of white origin, even if they were, they would have been bringing E1B1A. All right, because that's the predominant haplogroup of these people. But I don't believe they are, and I'm gonna show you why. Because we're about to get into some depictions of the ancient Jews from the Roman period. Depictions of ancient Jews from the Roman periods. I'm going to start off with coins. I believe this is Vespasian over here, or Titus, one of them to the left, and then you have Judean captives to the right. We're going to start off with a little ones, just showing the coins. You can't tell what they really look like on some of them, but some of them you can get a good look, good idea. But we're going to get into some more depictions after these coins, just showing the historicity regarding these events and these migrations. And again, this is also debunking the fact that our brothers and sisters like to say that Jerusalem is in sub-Saharan Africa, Jerusalem is in East Africa, wherever they like to say Jerusalem is at, because these Israelites were being brought in from Syro-Palestine. These people were being brought in from the Levant into North Africa and dispersing southward into sub-Saharan Africa. But again, let's continue. All right. Starting to see a little bit. All right. See thick black lip. Or we see thick lips, thick nose. All right. Again, just showing the historicity regarding these events with these coins. And again, over here is Vespasian or Titus, I believe. Forgot. It's a little better. Get to see a little bit of phenotypes. All right. Man and a woman. These are captives. This one is as well. Man and a woman. We can see a beard and as well as a fro, or something that looks as if it's a fro. Let's continue. Miscegenation, the theory of the blending of races, American white man and Negro. The Savior is represented very falsely in paintings as being light-haired and white-skinned, when in truth, he must have been a man of very dark complexion, as were all the Palestinian Jews, all right? They were a tawny or yellow race. The fact has been noticed that the Amharic, the language of Abyssinia, is remarkably analogous to the Hebrew, rendering probably that the Jews were partly of Negro or Abyssinian origin. So I brought this source out to show this, a median face image of an inhabitant of the same region in which the stories of Jesus are attributed, image modeled at the request of BBC Brazil, reported Edison Viega. And this is possibly a description of what they said Jesus looked like, or what they say Jesus looked like, or what people within Jesus' region looked like during the time. And we know Jesus was on the scene during the Roman period. And this is the author of this illustration right here. But let's get a better depiction. All right. Clearly Negroid. All right. So that's what I say our ancestors look like, coming in from North Africa. Even this, faces of the biblical Jews from Israel. Comparison. A mandibular measurements of two individuals, a man from Israel dating from the 6th century BCE up to AD. All right, so that will encompass the Roman period as well. And we see what this man looks like right here. All right. And a woman from Israel dating from the beginning of the CE, of the Common Era. And we can definitely tell that that is a sister as well. And that would be during the Roman period as well. So this is what Israelites will be looking like during this period. The beginning of Jewishness. This is a Ptolemaic papyri dealing with the Jews and what they would look like in Rome. All right, a few such inscriptions of Adios, I don't even know how to pronounce this in Greek, but this is Jew. And it says, are extinct. It says Apollinos, honey colored, Sostratos, or Sostratos, honey colored, Jananis, honey colored, Apollinos, honey colored. So we see all these Jews are honey colored, dark colored skin, honey colored skin, dark skin. So we see that these are dark and honey colored skin Jews listed off by the Romans in their own Ptolemaic papyri. And here goes some depictions of some honey skinned Jews in the Greco-Roman period from Egypt. All right, so this is what they depict the Jews looking like in Egypt during the Greco-Roman period. And we see that Ptolemy or the Ptolemaic papyri describe Jews as being honey colored and dark. And they had Greek names. All right, so I just want to show this real quick before I get into these images, just to show a quick distinction. So within the New Testament, in certain instances, we can see a distinction made between Greek-speaking Jews who are Hellenistes or Hellenists, and we can also see a distinction between regular Greeks who are just Hellen. And right here, if we look at the Strong's for Hellen, it is a Greek either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or of the Greek islands of colonies. All right, so it says in a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews. All right, so these dealing with this word right here, Hellen, is not Jews, and a reference to that is Galatians chapter 2, verse 3. And it's dealing with Titus, and it says, neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, a Hellen, was compelled to be circumcised. All right. And dealing with Hellenistes, a Hellenist, one who imitates the manner and customs or the worships of the Greeks and used the Greek tongue and used in the New Testament of Jews born in foreign lands and speaking Greek. All right. A Hellenistes, a Greek speaking Jew, a Grecian. All right. So when we see Grecian within the scripture, and we have to look at the Strong sometimes for these words for context, we can see that it mentions Greek speaking Jews sometimes or Hellenistes. And examples of that is Acts 6 and 1, Acts 9:29, and Acts 11 and 20. All right. Just for scripture references. And I'm just read Acts 6 and 1 for context. And it says, in those days, when the number of disciples was multiplied, there was a uprising. There arose a mourning of the Grecians against the Hebrews, all right, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. And you can think about the Hebrews, just basically Hebrew Israelites, those following the laws of Moses, and the Grecians, those Greek-speaking Jews who are under the Greek traditions. Because we did read that Ptolemy made this or passed this law or made basically all the Jews convert to their religion during that time. And we also read it in the book of Maccabees. And again, I brought those Strongs out because when we get to the picture like this, a bronze statue of a boyish orator, a Hellenistic Alexandrian, right along, tight curled hair, nose and lips, Negroid, but not extreme. This is a baby Jew, man. Look at the baby Jew. Again, Hellenistes is a Greek-speaking Jew or Grecian, and we have a depiction of a Hellenistic Jew within Alexandria. He's Negroid, but not extreme. So they say. All right. And this will be in Egypt. Here's another bronze statue of boy, perhaps also an orator, Hellenistic, tight curled hair, round face, neither lips nor nose extreme, subnational pronotonism, stomach somewhat protruding, 2nd and 1st century BCE. This is during the Greco-Roman periods. This is a Hellenistic Jew, a baby Jew. This is a Greek-speaking Jew, and we can see that these Jews are depicted as Negroid. So what would we expect these people to look like once they transverse the Sahara it mixed with the other inhabitants that's already there. Even when they mix with other Israelites that's already there, they would still look the same, if not more Negroid. So again, if you have questions, go ahead and propose them. Go ahead and drop them in the chat. Any questions, comments? I'm about to get ready and wrap up this presentation. But again, we have plenty of descriptions and pictures of what these Jews would have looked like. You know what I'm saying? Again, this is either Christ or a depiction of what people during Christ's time and in his area would have looked like. Again, this is a man and woman from the Greco-Roman period. These people are both Negroid in appearance. All right, the Ptolemaic papyri told us these Jews were honey-colored and dark-skinned. Here are honey-colored and dark-skinned Jews from the Greco-Roman period in Egypt. All right, here are Hellenistic Jews, Greek-speaking Jews in Egypt. All right. So everything matches up. We also see that they settled amongst the Soniki people, which means that they more than likely are still amongst the Soniki and Mandi tribes today. All right, because they settled in the kingdom of Ghana with them. And we already know that the Soniki people were already Israelites and they were already there. All right. So again, that wraps it up. Go to the chat. Man, I hope you all enjoyed the video, man. I hope you all enjoyed the video. See if we have any questions, any comments. Please, please, please have any questions and comments. Please drop them in the chat. Hit that thumbs up button. Hit that thumbs up button. All right, all right. So again, as we can see, it is true that in 70 AD, the Jews did end up going into Africa, as we read, some voluntarily, some by force, by way of enslavement. They were settling basically in Carthage, in Libya, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Morocco, and Tunis as well. All right. And as the years progressed, when them being in the Roman colonies and territories, they kept being oppressed, so forth, so on. So they started to revolt and uprise. They started to revolt and uprise and migrate amongst the Berbers, who would probably be their cousins or something like that. Some of them, depending on what Berber tribes there are. I know they were amongst the Moabite Berbers, all right? But again, they would settle amongst the Berbers. Some would settle into the Sahara, set up trade routes, all right? As the wars went on, they ended up migrating down into the Niger River in 115 AD, 118 AD. All right. They settled amongst the Mandi Soniki people and later founded the kingdom of Ghana and Mali. All right. So we can see that they did end up in Western Africa. Shalom, shalom, Todah. Yes, yes, yes. All praise to the Most High. Shabbat shalom to everybody too as well. Thank you, thank you. Again, if anybody has any questions, any comments, you know what I'm saying, drop them. Anything, right? But again, I do have some more videos coming out here soon. I may do a book read tomorrow dealing with the Afik people in Calabar. I was supposed to do that a few weeks ago, but I forgot. But I still do have the book. I actually converted it to a PDF version so we can read that. But again, I thank you all for tuning in. I don't see any questions, anything tuning in. But thanks who was involved in the conversation today. Thanks to those who commented in the chat. And again, just like the video up on your way out, share it as well. And just be on the lookout for the next videos within the next few days. All right. Enjoy your Shabbat. Brother Dorville, what PDF version are you talking about real quick? Just verify that for me real quick so I can know what you're talking about. What PDF would you like? Again, if anybody wants any sources or anything, go ahead and drop it real quick while I'm still on here. Again, Brother Dorv L, if you still here, let me know what you're talking about specifically. What PDF? All right, just email me, brother. Just email me, brother. I don't think you're watching, but I'm sure you'll email me. All right. But Shabbat Shalom, family. Enjoy your Shabbat day.